What is peace? What is America first? Who decides? Who's pro-war? You know, we'd have a different, very different world today if Kamala Harris were president. She'd be agreeing with Bernie Sanders. She'd be agreeing with Chadworth Catarleson. In other words, it would be Iran pretty much free to do whatever it wants, and Israel having to sit there, and the United States having to sit there. I can't think of a great president of the United States who would ever have done that. Not one. Washington? Lincoln? Not one. Reagan? And Donald Trump is one of the greatest presidents in American history. I've told you over and over again over the years, Donald Trump is not an isolationist. He's never even used that word to define who and what he is or believes. He's not an appeaser. He's not a pacifist. Foreign policy is about what? What have I written and what have we discussed here? It's not about ideology. Never wars, quote unquote. Forever wars, quote unquote. Always unexplained. And yet apparently in every circumstance it applies. But it can't. Every circumstance is different. Different countries, different threats. Foreign policy should be looked at not as an ideological matter. That could kill you. As a prudential matter. As President Trump calls it, common sense. You look at the facts. You look at the countries you're dealing with, our experience with them, the world's experience with them, and you apply our principles. Our principles. So what is peace when we're dealing with Iran like this? What is peace? Now, you know that peace is not isolationism when a country keeps threatening to destroy you, tries to assassinate our president, is hell-bent on having nuclear weapons and building tens of thousands of ballistic missiles. We don't have an iron shield. We don't have any defensive system sufficient enough to stop any of this. Some of it, but not enough of it. If we had ballistic missiles raining down on our major cities, you know what we would do about it. And you know quite well that if any country within our hemisphere, let alone on our border, was developing nuclear missiles, that is, nuclear warheads and missiles to fire them at us, we wouldn't tolerate that. So why is it that when it comes to the state of Israel, they're expected to tolerate it? And why is it that when it comes to us, we should tolerate it? Is that America first? That's never been America first under any interpretation or definition of America first, because it's not. Two simple words, America first. Our enemies would love this. They do love it. And who gets to decide? The isolationist radicals, they want you to believe that Donald Trump has deceived you, that he's defied his own statements. We've heard some of this from people on some of our friendliest platforms. The problem is them. That's their position. It's never been Donald Trump's position. He's never conducted himself that way. You see, there's some confusion out there, and it's intentional. That if you're prudent with the use of military force, use it as a last resort, but nonetheless feel the trigger needs to be pulled, you're a warmonger. Over at Mediaite, some guy wrote, Mark's pro-war. I'm not pro-war. I'm anti-terrorists with nuclear weapons who keep saying they're going to use it against us. That's not pro-war. That's pro-American. I tried to have the gentleman come on the program tonight. He refused. Kobe Howell over at Mediate. He's the big guy there. He said he didn't want to be insulted and so forth. And so, look, Kobe, I'll tell you what. You weren't going to be insulted. I wanted to have a real discussion. I don't understand what you do at Mediate. All of you. I don't understand why you have these hyper dishonest headlines. I don't understand your mission. And I wanted you to explain it to the American people. Because I see little distance between you and Media Matters. And is that what you're about? Aggregating things, slapping crazy titles on them? And certainly from center left. More left. And I don't understand why you're an apologist for these extremists, effectively, when you give a description of Chatsworth Catarlson and you leave out completely his anti-Semitism and his promotion of anti-Semites. That's wrong. But you didn't want to have that discussion. It would have been a very professional discussion. No name calling, no insults. I had my producer tell you that. I hope you'll rethink this. I really do. These guys can't do enough stories with me in them. And then every year they put out a list. Most influential media figures, right, Mr. Producer? Well, if I'm not on your list of 65, why do you keep talking about me, writing about me, and reporting about me? Don't you think that's kind of dishonest? I should be right at the top of your stupid list, but it doesn't matter. The vast majority of America doesn't know what Mediaite is if I don't mention it. But it's part and parcel of the problem. We have this site called Axios, which is quite left. And they have a reporter there, Barack Ravin. And he used to be the go-to guy for the Biden administration, for the Biden State Department, them and Politico and a few others, where basically they're scribes for people who leak to them. And in the Trump presidency, the isolationists are leaking like hell. They're relentless. It's almost every day to him, mostly to him. And all these stories, the president denies them, other people deny them, trying to show a terrible rift between Israel and the president or the United States, and on and on and on. And the president put out a statement today saying what they had was false. And there are reports, as I surmised, about who's involved, which offices are involved. But I'm going to keep my powder dry until there's a little bit more meat on that bone. But it is as I expected. I don't leak to the media, by the way, as a footnote. You can ask the media. I don't. If I have something to say, I'll say it on the record. I don't talk a lot to the media. Conservative media, sure, but I'm talking about the corporate media. Why should I? I have a radio show, a TV show, I have a digital show. I can talk to you directly. And I don't believe what I say will be reported accurately anyway. I've spent tens of thousands of hours behind this microphone explaining my views in great detail. I've written 10 best-selling books with thousands of notes on the back, footnotes and endnotes. And this is what I want to discuss from the guy from Mediaite. Why is it that you never report about these things? You really want to know my view? They're spelled out in exquisite detail over the course of over 2 decades. My views are not a secret. I'm here today to express them, to explain them, if necessary, to defend them or alter them. Donald Trump has explained what America First means, and we have really outliers, some of whom I think have serious psychological issues, who insist that they get to define or insist on projecting onto Donald Trump what their views are, even though Donald Trump has never embraced them. Of course, he's embraced their support, needs votes, but he's never embraced their views. I told you this, and I've told you this over and over again. Just to keep throwing the word around, peace, 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 doesn't make it so, nor does it mean the people who keep using it are for peace or have any idea what peace is about. If you have a guy next door, and he keeps telling you he wants to kill you, and he supports and funds individuals who've killed family members of yours. And he's telling you he wants to get a weapon strong enough to blow your house up. You just sit there and say peace means just sitting on my ass and watching this and listening to this? Of course not. That's not peace. Iran with nuclear weapons and now ballistic missiles, we've learned about, that's not peace. The question is, how do you ensure peace? How do you ensure that the United States is never hit by these weapons? You're talking about a 7th century barbarian police state, a primitive regime that believes God, their God, requires them to kill us, as you'll learn when you read my book on power. Now, we have a brain for a reason. We take into consideration what we know, what we've experienced, what we've seen, what we know about the death cult. That's called knowledge. That's what human beings use to make decisions. Those who promote this radical isolationist position, all they keep doing is yelling, no more war. Does the enemy agree with them? I mean, what is this, 3rd grade? And yet their conduct gave aid and comfort, I believe, to the Iranian regime. They thought they could hang on listening to these people. They were undermining the president's message. He's making the decision. You know, ladies and gentlemen, it's one thing to have a disagreement with President Trump. It's one thing to have been never Trump. You know, it's another thing to have been an aggressive primary where names are thrown around and so forth and so on. Marco Rubio, J.D. Vance, not even in the primary. He used some horrible things about Trump and so forth and so on. And you're done. It's over. And you move on. And the president has brought people like this into his cabinet, into his confidence. That's the way it works. That's the way it worked when Ronald Reagan got elected, and I worked for him. And I remember all these Bush guys attacking him left and right, left and right. What did he do? He appointed the top Bush guy, George H.W. Bush, as vice president, just as he appointed J.D. Vance, his vice president, despite being called Hitler and so forth. That's not what I'm talking about. And you have a patriotic, American-loving, smart, historic, iconic president. A commander-in-chief who's trying to sort through complicated issues. Of course you can give your opinion. I do. Of course you can disagree. I have. That's the way it is. It's a democracy with free speech. But when you leak against him, you try and handicap him, you try and undo his policies, you viciously attack people who may have a different viewpoint than you do, even though you're the outlier and they're not. When you claim to represent the 77 million people who voted for him, when 76 million of them don't even know who the hell you are, you're destructive. You're dangerous. You can try and influence policy using argumentation, using persuasion, facts, evidence. Great. We should all do that. I do that all the time, right here behind a microphone. But when you literally try and damage him, especially in a wartime footing, that's not normal. That's not normal at all. That's a disgrace. And that's what they're doing. No, I'm not for war. I'm for peace. I'm against the Islamo-Nazi regime that has slaughtered over 600 Americans, thousands of casualties. Enough is enough.